quiet.
Mr. President-elect,
Go ahead.
can you say
She's
categorically,
asking a question. Don't
Mr.
be
President-elect, can you give us a question?
Don't be
You're
rude.
attacking us. Can you give us a question?
Don't be rude. No, I'm not going to give you a
question.
question. I'm not going to give you a question.
Can you state categorically?
You are fake news.
Sir.
I'm Dr. Dave Janda. Welcome back to Dave versus the MSM. I'd like to thank you for joining me today. Thank you for networking this information to anyone and everyone you know. We are available 24/7 at davejanda.com with extra shows, extra content, extra guests, extra analysis, archives to all of our shows. We hope you become part of our freedom family. The focus of today's presentation is on your financial and economic freedom. It has constantly been under attack for decades, but they've now upped their games, just as they did in 2000 and 2008 and 2019. They were direct attacks on your economic freedom because, let's face it, if they can make you destitute, they can make you run to their cult, run to the government cult to save you. And you see, when we see the unemployment numbers, unemployment going up, the economy going down, we say, oh my goodness, that's bad. And the cult members, the banking families, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, Lazards, the Pincus, the Warburgs, the Seifs, and at the top of the pyramid, the Payseur family, they're like, oh good, more chaos, more destruction, more people destitute. More people who will come run to us and say, save me. You see, they create these problems, whether they're wars or border issues or climate issues or economic catastrophes. They create them. And then they manage them. And ultimately, they end up getting more power, more control, and more financial resources because you run to them and you hand over your freedom to them. Just think of the past 3 years, right? Prime example. But they use the economic card every decade or so to strip more freedom, to get more people dependent on them. The more people they have dependent on unemployment benefits, on government benefits, the better for them. This is why the cult despises freedom, why they despise empowerment of the individual. This is why they've targeted me for decades, because my message, whether it was in medicine or whatever it might be, has been on empowerment of you. And the way you become empowered is by becoming educated. Why do you think the attack on the educational system? The title of today's presentation is something that was told to me by my dad since I was a little kid and reinforced all the time. The title is, If You Don't Hold It, You Don't Own It. And this is incredibly important right now as we're going through this cult-induced banking crisis. Ernest Hemingway said the following, quote, how do you go bankrupt? 2 ways. Gradually and then suddenly. End quote. Think about what's happened to our economic system over a number of decades' time. And in particular, just look at what's happened in 2008. Look what happened in 2000. Look what happened in 2019. Look what's happening now with this banking crisis that's designed to strip more freedom from you and give the cult, the bankster-directed cult, more power, more control, and more financial resources. From Zero Hedge, U.S. banks sitting on unrealized losses of $620 billion. Silicon Valley Bank's downfall was tied in part to the plunge in the value of bonds it acquired during boom times, when it had a lot of customer deposits coming in and needed somewhere to park the cash. But Silicon Valley Bank isn't the only institution with that issue. U.S. banks are sitting on $620 billion in unrealized losses. Assets that have decreased in price but haven't been sold yet. This according to the FDIC. Now, you might say, well, wait, FDIC, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. Well, my bank account is backstopped up to $250,000. So my $2,000, $3,000 in the bank is protected. So I don't have anything to worry about. Okay. That's what they want you to think. But what's the reality? Okay. Right now, there are over 17 trillion with a T, trillion dollars in bank accounts in United States banks that are FDIC insured. Okay. So, if there are $17 trillion worth of cash accounts in banks, that means there must be at least $17 trillion and $1 that the FDIC has to bail those accounts out, right? Because if they say they can back them, right? Wrong. I went to the FDIC website. Okay. Yeah, $17 trillion are there in bank accounts that the FDIC backs up. And do you know how much money the FDIC has in their account to cover that $17 trillion? $125 billion. What? Well, wait, there's 1,000 billion in a trillion, and there's 17 trillion. Right. It's all a con. And by the way, how did the Silicon Valley Bank get in this problem? And all these other banks, right? There's been a run, right? There's been Silvergate that went down, Silicon Valley Bank, Signature Bank, just to name a couple. There's a number of them in trouble. We hear about Credit Suisse that's linked to all the other banks around the world and many other banks, right? How did they get? Well, how about this? The Federal Reserve, not a part of the federal government. Everybody, look, 99% of the people you know thinks the Federal Reserve is part of the United States federal government. They're not. They're not part of the executive branch, the legislative branch, or the judicial branch. They are an independent group of bankers that was formed in 1913 by globalist cult member President Woodrow Wilson, who this group of independent bankers, cartel, banksters is why I call them banksters because they're criminals, got together and they leveraged Wilson and Congress, which they passed in the dead of the night around Christmas Eve, to offload the printing of U.S. money from the Treasury to them, the Federal Reserve, a group of bankers who only cares about bankers. They don't care about you. They don't care about me. They don't care about any American, which is why, since they took control of the printing presses and the production of money, the U.S. dollar has fallen in purchase power by 99%. Do you think that's an accident? Do you think that? If you do, please shut this video off. Go somewhere else. Because it's not an accident. It was their game plan about bringing more people into the unemployment lines, into the save me, government, please. So people would have their freedoms and liberties stripped further. So this group of independent bankers, the Fed, what have they been doing? They kept pumping out money. And what did Milton Friedman, who won the Nobel Prize in economics, tell us? It's too many dollars that are printed that are chasing too few goods. That produces inflation. What did the Fed do? They started pouring out money, whether it was for the dot-com bubble about to break, or whether it was about the mortgage-backed security about to break in 2008, or whether it was about the pandemic. They created trillions of dollars of cash, created inflation, and then what do? They create the problem, remember, and then they manage it so that they get more. So that what do? They raise interest rates. In the past year, they've raised interest rates faster than they ever have in the history of the U.S. economy. And what's happened? It's put banks that borrow short and lend long. These banks got all this cash because right? That's what was said in that Zero Hedge article. And then they have to invest it. Well, they were investing at 0% interest rates, and now the interest rates are at 4.5%. They're losing money. And they're going bankrupt. You think that's an accident? I don't. Because what's happened? These small and regional banks were targeted. People are pulling their money out, and where are they putting them? In the big money center banks, the JP Morgan Chases, the Bank of America, the Wells Fargo, the Citigroup, who are essentially the stalwarts of the Federal Reserve System, of the banking syndicate. I told you, who runs the big banks? The Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, right? And who's over them? The Payseur family that has their fingers in all these banking syndicates. I recently had Craig Hemke, financial analyst extraordinaire, on my radio show. And we were talking about this. And here's what Craig said. Let's try to summarize the current situation with some quick points. When Obama and Biden were in office in 2009, they changed what were called the GAAP, GAAP rules, to allow banks to price their fixed income portfolios, their bonds that they bought, because people were depositing all kinds of cash in, at 100 cents on the dollar instead of what the market might be. So as interest rates went up, the bond prices fell, but they kept it to make them look solvent. And this is because of what Obama and Biden did. It's a smoke and mirror show that, oh yeah, that bond is 100 cents on the dollar, when in fact it was far less. 70 cents on the dollar, 60 cents on the dollar, 30 cents on the dollar. And that's how they were made to look solvent when in fact they weren't, which helped lead to this current crisis. So when Biden says, oh, it was all Trump no. This all stemmed back from what Obama and Biden did in 2009. And frankly, what Bill Clinton did in 1999. In 1999, Clinton repealed the Glass-Steagall Act that was put in effect in 1933. Why was that put in effect? What it said is banks, the syndicate didn't like this, and they worked. It took them 66 years to get this repealed, but they got it repealed because it hamstrung banks. What the Glass-Steagall Act did in 1933 said, wait a minute, we just went through this whole Depression thing, and this was really brought on by the bankers. And one of the things that brought it on was they had an investment side, and they had a deposit side, a banking side, and then an investment side, and they were merging the two. We're going to separate them. So if depositors put money in the deposit side of the bank, that money over here can't be used over here for investment. That's the Glass-Steagall Act. In 1999, good old Billy Clinton, globalist cult member extraordinaire, pushed it through Congress that the Glass-Steagall Act was gone. Between 1933 and 1999, when they got rid of it, there were no major financial catastrophes. What happened after 99? Well, we had the 2000 crash, right? Remember that one? Then we had the 2007, 2008 crash. Remember that one? And then we had the 2019 goat rodeo. And now we got this. It's all planned. Because out of these crashes, the banksters get more power, more control, and more money. And then they did this 2009 deal in setting us up for what's happening today. So here's what Craig said. This is all fine until the day comes when those bonds must be sold for immediate cash, which is happening now. Suddenly, that bank whether it's Silicon Valley Bank, Signature Bank, Silvergate, a number of these others. Suddenly, that bank is shown to be insolvent. Assets worth less than total liabilities. A run on deposit ensues. The bank collapses. The FDIC comes over and takes it over. And when they say a bailout, here's what a bailout is. Remember all those bailouts in 2007, 2008? There's still some worthwhile investments in these banks that go under. The feds come in and say, oh, JP Morgan, do you want this really good thing? Okay, good. Here you go. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create a fund of all the toxic assets, and we're going to let the taxpayers pay for that. That's a bailout. That's a bailout. The banksters win, and you and I and every taxpayer loses. That's a bailout. So what are they talking about doing now? Well, we're going to create a fund. Where did that fund come from? Oh, not taxpayer based. Excuse me. Well, we're going to charge banks extra money to put in this fund. Wait a minute. You don't think those fees are going to be passed on to all of us? Of course they are. Oh, we're going to backstop it with money from the Exchange Stabilization Fund. Oh, that's another doozy. The Exchange Stabilization Fund. The only person who would talk about the Exchange Stabilization Fund was Rob Kirby. God rest his soul. Rob was and he took, believe me, because he would talk about it on my radio show and in my video interviews with him all the time, and he would get immense grief for this. The Exchange Stabilization Fund, do you know how it was funded? It was when FDR came in and confiscated precious metals. Yeah. Stole money from the public because they paid the public $20 an ounce, $18 an ounce, and then they revalued it right after they got it to $35 an ounce. Ooh, quick 100% profit. Good old FDR. Oh, he cared about the people so much. Cult member. So they're backstopping this fund supposedly with money from the Exchange Stabilization Fund that has grown to be many hundred, we don't even know, it's so black budget, but hundreds of billions over the years, right? Because the gold they confiscated is worth $2,000 an ounce now, not 35. But when the Fed stepped in, they said, oh, we'll put about $25 billion in. Well, some analysts have looked at this and said, $25 billion, that's not going to cover it for this fund to backstop. Because remember, they said, well, we're going to backstop even those companies and the people who had over $250,000 in an account. Just so happens most of those people were woke. And part of the woke crowd, what did they determine? That $73 million through just one bank, the Silicon Valley Bank, was given to that BLM movement, that wonderful organization, the Summer of Love, and all those fires and arson and deaths that occurred. Yeah. Then we come to find out, because many people said, well, wait a minute, why did the FDIC have to step in? Why did the federal government, why did the Treasury have to step in and cordon it off and create a fund? Why didn't somebody just buy it? Another scandal, this from Zero Hedge, Biden administration radicals blocked the Silicon Valley Bank sale, nationalized it, and then blamed Trump for the collapse. Wow. Kevin Hassett, former chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, recently stated, quote, there were buyers who were willing to step in and buy Silicon Valley Bank, but the radicals at the FDIC under Biden basically weren't going to allow that to happen. The Biden administration had a white list of companies that were allowed to buy the failed bank and companies that weren't. Wow. So then, as the Wall Street Journal put it, rather than letting the free market resolve a somewhat ordinary bank collapse, they used the opportunity to nationalize Silicon Valley Bank, because when the feds come in and take it over, they nationalize it, right? Yeah. Using tax money to ensure their campaign donors were made whole, because that's who they were bailing out over these cats and these companies that had over $250,000 in their accounts. Right. In addition, politicians like good old Liz Warren, Pocahontas, together with regulatory bodies, fragilized crypto banks, because that's what a lot of these banks were focused on, crypto banks and crypto markets, and encouraged runs against them, then used withdrawals as a pretext to close them down. You see, one of the other sinister sides of this is that one of the issues we keep talking about is the ultimate freedom-stripping move that the financial world, I call them financial digital, are these central bank digital currencies that will strip you of your complete freedom. Because every transaction, whether it's paying your kid an allowance or whatever, buying a car, whatever it might be, is monitored by the feds. And these central bank digital currencies that they want to institute would do just that. So that means cash goes away. That means they clear the field of all these other alternatives, like what? Like cryptocurrencies, like Bitcoin. Well, wait a minute. A lot of these banks that are going under were holding accounts of cryptocurrency exchanges. So here is why they're going after these banks. Another reason. If they can annihilate the exchanges associated with cryptocurrencies, then if you have a cryptocurrency and you can't buy it and you can't sell it, what good is it? It clears their competition for their central bank digital currencies. And they say, well, you can't do that because but there's ours. Here's our solution. Remember, they create the problem and then they give you a solution that harms you. And if the last 3 years didn't tell you that, right? Create the weapon and then, here's your solution. Really? What about sudden and unexpected, right? Okay. Well, that's what they're trying to do with the financial system now. You need to contact every person you know in local, state, and federal government. Tell them you're wise to these central bank digital currencies, and they are not to do this. And if they don't actively try to get rid of it, you're going to find somebody to run against them so they lose in the primary, and you're going to get rid of them in their office. You got to do that. If they know you're wise to something and they're on the wrong side of it, no matter how they try to rig whatever machine might be for the next election, if the public is wise to it, they know they can't rig the machines enough. Really important. And then we have Moody's step forward, the rating agency. And they want to be able to say down the line, well, we told you. Moody's downgrades entire U.S. banking system. Welcome to Banking Crisis 3.0. This is from two outstanding financial journalists, the best, I believe, Pam Martins and Russ Martins. The credit agency Moody's downgraded the entire U.S. banking system outright to negative from stable. This is Banking Crisis 3.0 because this is the third time, excluding the emergency measures taken in 2020 as a result of the COVID pandemic, that the Federal Reserve has deployed emergency measures to bail out the U.S. banking system in the past 15 years. What I mentioned before, prior to the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act under Bill Clinton in 1999, which prevented the combination of Wall Street trading houses with federally insured banks, there had been no major Fed bailouts for 66 years. But because Congress failed to restore the Glass-Steagall Act after the 2008 financial crash, the worst since the Great Depression, the Fed was back to secretly bailing out trading units of the behemoth depository banks in September 2019. Mainstream media across the board censored this critical story. That censorship allowed Congress to kick the can down the road, leading to this even greater current banking crisis 3.0 today. Right. Which brings me back to the title of this presentation. If you can't hold it, you really don't own it. That was Ben Janda. That was the lesson he taught me. That paper is vapor. That if you can't hold it, such as physical gold, physical silver, you don't own it, because there are counterparty risks to every paper investment. Think of it. Even to a dollar bill, there's counterparty risk because it's backed by the full faith in the United States government. That dollar is based on the United States government and people's faith in it. Got much faith in it? Right. Why do you think the dollar is depreciating? Investments. I own a stock. Well, wait a minute. That's based on that company that you're investing in and their assets and their liabilities and their creditors. When you hold physical gold and physical silver, there are no creditors to it. You have it. I go back about 25 years. I came home from work. I got in the mail, and in it was my 401k statement. And I was at the kitchen table, and my dad was sitting on the couch. And I opened it, and I must have smiled or something. And he looks at me, and he goes, "What's that?" I go, "Oh, it's my 401k statement." He goes, "Oh, you like the number, obviously, based on your smile." Well, it's okay. Yeah, okay, yeah. He goes, "Whatever that number is, it's really zero. Because that paper is all vapor. It's all based on credit." Yeah. And why did he say that? It's based on a previous video I did that many people found inspirational as well as educational. And actually, I put it out 6 months ago because I felt I knew what was coming in our financial world, and I was right. You need to watch that video. It's located on our homepage. It's free at davejanda.com. It's called, it's right above the subscription content and on the homepage, on the left-hand side, Dr. Dave's Fight for Freedom. And it's also, when you come to our channel on YouTube, it's heavily suppressed, but at the top of our channel is a video, same video, called The Road to Your and Our Freedom. I encourage you to watch it because it's based on my family's 4-generational battle against the globalist cult, the globalist syndicate. And in particular, it focuses on what happened to my great-grandfather. And to make a long story short, in the banking crash of 1907 and 1908, that the banksters used to persuade Woodrow Wilson to create the Federal Reserve, help usher it in, it was a banking collapse. And my great-grandfather was running one of the biggest breweries in the Chicago area, if not the Midwest, because he was kind of the, I mentioned before, the Tiger Woods of Pilsner beer. He had come from the Czechoslovakia and was the guy who developed the formula for Pilsner beer. And he ended up creating one of the incredibly successful brewery and was expanding. And as he expanded, he took loans out with the banks. And he always backstopped his loans with deposits. Just so happens the banks collapsed. The feds came in, federal government, and said, we got control of this bank, and you have a loan out, and we want that, although it's due in 10 years, you have to pay it because we have to get the assets out of the bank because we took it over because it failed. We're going to make that loan due in a month. And his response was, okay, I got the cash to back up that loan in that bank. And he said, great, but here's the problem. You can't take your cash out. We're closing that side of the bank. And we'll eventually release it, but not in a month. Well, he had money in other financial institutions that hadn't gone under, but not enough to cover that loan. They ended up taking his business, long story short. And he went to work. There were feds at his door, at the door of the brewery, locking it up, employees all the way down the street and around the corner. He's devastated. And he had a stroke. And on his deathbed, he told my grandfather, in that drawer over there, go there. You did. He goes, there's 2 bags. Get them, small bags. And there were a bag of gold coins and a bag of silver coins. He said, listen to me. The government that stole my business, the government that has my cash, that I could pay that loan, that government that won't let me use my cash is going to destroy this country. And the only thing that will get you and the family through are those gold coins and those silver coins. Because if you hold them, you own them, and there's nobody that can take them from you. Okay? That's the lesson, folks. I did that video over 6 months ago because I knew what was coming. I really felt I knew what was coming based on reading the tea leaves of what was happening around the world. If you haven't watched that video, you must. And then you must network it to anyone and everyone you know, and you need to do the same with this. Which brings me to an article, funny, from Peter Schiff. It's big in the financial world. Silicon Valley Bank lessons. If you can't hold it, it's not really yours. Go back to Václav Janda. If you hold it, you own it. Ben Janda. If you hold it, you own it. The video I did 6 months ago. If you hold it, you own it. And that's what the cult doesn't want you to realize. They don't want you protected. They don't. They want you vulnerable. They want it so that you run to them because you're destitute. Because your paper became vapor. Whether it's in a bank, or it's in a stock, or it's in a bond. And then they can tell you, well, if you want us to help you, you'll accept these central bank digital currencies. If you want us to help you, you'll give up your freedom and your liberty. Because that's what they're after, folks. Fact. That's not being negative. It's not being paranoid. It's being honest. Something the bought-off lamestream fake media will never be with you. Peter Schiff. The failure of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank remind us of a very important truth. If you can't hold it in your hand, you don't really own it. That's why it's wise to hold at least some of your wealth in hard assets like gold and silver that are in your direct possession or at least stored in a secure, allocated, segregated, and insured storage facility. And he's right. He says, even if you manage to withdraw all of your money in physical cash from banks tomorrow and put it in your well-guarded safe at home, you are still a creditor to the Fed and Treasury. You still hold, as I mentioned, IOU paper with risk of loss. In fact, you've suffered significant losses in the value of your dollars, paper dollars, over the last 2 years thanks to rampant price inflation. And that wasn't an accident. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't malfeasance. That's what they wanted. Gold and silver, listen now, here's what he concludes. Exactly what I've told you. Gold and silver carry no counterparty risk. They are tangible assets that you can hold in your hand, and they can be bought and sold all over the world. Their value is recognized globally. While the price of gold or silver may fall, it will never fall to zero. Precious metals cannot default on their payments. They cannot commit fraud, and they cannot go bankrupt. I hope you will take this information and network it to anyone and everyone you know, because they are completely oblivious to this information. This is all conspiracy theory. When they go to their brokers say, well, you don't want to do that. That's kind of bunker mentality stuff. The brokers get paid based on what the accounts are that they oversee. And if money is being withdrawn from them, they lose some of their income. Of course, they're not going to give you the straight line on this, for the most part. Some do, but very few do. You need to act upon this. You need to take the lessons that Vaclav Janda and Ben Janda and Dave Janda have provided to you and act upon it. Because it could well mean your not just financial survival, but your survival. And I say this based on the track record of my family. If it were not for those coins, and my great-grandfather died soon after that conversation with my grandfather. If it were not for those coins, my grandfather said, we would have starved to death. We would have lost our home. We would have been on the street. And we undoubtedly would have gotten sick because we were malnutritioned. And we would have died. Yeah. Do what's right. Protect yourself. Don't listen to these clowns on CNBS that are all bought off. Fox Business News, Bloomberg, all of them. No. Do what's right. Get ahead of the game. Get ahead of the cult. Protect yourself. Until next time, Dave Janda signing off. You can join us 24/7 at davejanda.com. That Dr. Dave's Fight for Freedom, free, on the homepage of davejanda.com. Network it. It's eye-opening and inspirational and puts you ahead of the globalist cult, which is why they suppress this channel. They do everything in their power to block notifications, to manipulate view counts, manipulate comments, manipulate the like. They go so far as manipulating likes. That's how desperate they are to block the truth. Thanks for joining me today. Until next time, my dad's favorite saying, dream big and dare to fail. Thanks for your time today.